Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it's time to talk some Path of Exile. Now this is my first attempt at a build guide. It is what I'm going to call my acronym soup build because it is CI, it is ES, it is an AoE DOT build. Without talking any further about the build, I'm just going to quickly show it off in what should be an easy to medium difficulty delve, and then after that give you a bit of a heads up on what the character does, how it's built, and why some of the key build choices were made. This is not a finished character. There are no finished characters in this game, but this is something that's very easily achievable with early league gear. Currently I'm in the mid 80s levels. Now you'll notice that I'm firing off two major attacks. There's that ugly thing there, which is Vortex, and there's this much more subtle effect, which is a spell Cold Snap. I actually want to get a Vile Cold Snap, but I haven't yet purchased one. Vortex conjures a self-centered AoE that deals an initial hit to enemies that are in it. That initial hit is just a bit of a bonus, it's not the main deal, and then it deals in constant damage over time after that. Cold Snap is similar, except it's not necessarily self-centered. So there's Vortex, and there's a Cold Snap fired off to where my cursor was. Both have quite a large area of effect. Now that's partly because I've put a fair bit of AoE into the build, but it's also because as the gems level they do seem to develop quite a large area that they affect. I'm not actually sure whether that's coming from the gems themselves or whether it's coming from the... I think it's just coming from area of effect increases that I've got on the tree. Anyways, so let's demonstrate during the more hectic phase of this encounter, which should still be pretty easy. I mean, I am only in a monster level 71 zone, which is a tier 4 map, although delves do have more monsters than a map would have. Currently, for short-term burst damage, I am using Vile Storm Call. I'm not sure that this is the right choice, and as I said, I think I should be using Vile Cold Snap instead. I just simply haven't got around to trading for one. Anyways, without any further ado, that's a quick demonstration of the build in progress. Let's go through how it's built. Firstly, it is an Occultist, so you need to start as a witch, and then spec into the Occultist when you complete the normal labyrinth. The Occultist is a master of defenses, a master of curses, and a master of both chaos and cold damage, and basically having a theme of causing enemies to wither away. It has several different ways that it can be built, but I've decided to focus on the defensive aspects of the Occultist. So you'll notice by looking at my life pool, if you're not familiar with Chaos Inoculation, it'll look a bit strange to have only one life. That's because I've taken the Chaos Inoculation node, which makes you immune to chaos damage, but sets your total life to 1. Normally, going Chaos Inoculation isn't really an option very early in a league, because the powerful defensive energy shield focus gear that's required for Chaos Inoculation builds to succeed doesn't really exist. The Occultist is an exception to this rule. The Occultist picks up firstly the node that I take at the normal labyrinth, which is Wicked Ward, which provides you two very powerful defensive bonuses. Firstly, 100 flat energy shield. 100 flat energy shield is a lot more than it sounds. It's not just 100 of that 6797 that you see there. It is 100 that is then modified by all of these, not that node, all of these nodes on the tree. So instead of being 100, just this node alone makes it 120. Then there's this node which makes it 128. This node makes it 136, and so on. It scales with lots of sources on the passive tree, and so it's much more powerful than it looks. Secondly, energy shield recharge is not interrupted by damage if recharge began recently. Recently means 4 seconds. This is a tremendous defensive buff. Basically, once you manage to dodge enemies for a couple of seconds, you will have 4 seconds of extremely powerful regeneration. The second defensively oriented node in the Occultist is Vile Bastion, and this is even bigger. Firstly, it gives you 150 to maximum energy shield. That's 150 flat again. That scales up with everything on the tree. Next, you cannot be stunned while you have Energy Shield. One of the biggest weaknesses of Energy Shield, Energy Shield builds normally, is that your resilience to stun is based upon your maximum life in Path of Exile. Now, with a character like this, that's using Chaos Inoculation, it's not your just one hit point that you've got with Chaos Inoculation. It's what you would have if you did not have Chaos Inoculation spec'd. So let me just refund Chaos Inoculation and see what that would be. So for me, that's 1,780. It's a very small amount of life. And that's my resilience to stuns. It's no different. My resilience as a character solidly in maps is no different to the resilience to stuns that a life-based character that is going through Act 6 at the moment would be expected to have. So, as long as you have at least 1 point of Energy Shield, you're immune to stun. That is incredible. Lastly, there is this tremendous little stacking buff. This the middle part of the node. 1% Energy Shield regen per second for each enemy that you or your minions have killed recently. Again, up to 4 seconds. Up to a maximum of 30% per second. Now, when I'm delving, this typically I'm typically killing between 10 and 30 monsters per 4 seconds. In maps, it's a little bit slower, and Vile Bastion typically sticks around 15, a count of about 15. Regenerating 15% of 6,700 Energy Shield is a phenomenal defense. It means I need to take 1,000 more damage per second in order to go down. And that is available all the time. Whether I'm in full Energy Shield regen, or even if I've just taken a hit and I'm degenerating at the time. After taking those two powerful defensive nodes, which I do by Cruel Labyrinth, typically around the time that you fight Doedre in Act 8, at that point I will pick up Void Beacon, which is a powerful offensive node that obliterates your nearby enemies, both their cold resistance and their life regeneration. It doesn't have any... The chaos resistance side of things isn't important to me at the moment, but other players can benefit from it if you're grouped. My plan for the Eternal Labyrinth, once I'm flagged for it, because this is early in the league and I don't yet have it, is Frigid Wake. This gives me immunity to being frozen or chilled, which is huge. Again, it's a massive defense because your resilience against freezes is based upon your pre-Chaos Inoculation hit points. And so, as an Energy Shield build, I'm getting frozen just as easily, again, as an Act 6 melee character would be. It adds 20% to cold damage over time multiplier, which is an incredibly powerful offensive stat for this build. And it also gives you chances. It also gives you intermittent freezes and freezes on nearby enemies that will basically provide a degree of protection while you're running through monsters, butchering them left, right, and center. So that's my plan for the Eternal Labyrinth. I've not yet reached it. In terms of the tree structure, I path up through the Energy Shield nodes, which are pretty weak while leveling, but if you're familiar enough with the leveling process, you can get through it without having picked up any effective defensive nodes, because life nodes are good defense when you're until you pick up Chaos Inoculation, which I didn't pick up until I was both in maps and had my first 2 good pieces of ES gear. So for me that was about level 74, for you it might differ. So I path up through the Energy Shield nodes even though I get very little benefit from them. I then, although I hold off on getting these optional ones here, and I do need to pick up this one because it's quite solid. Needed to pick up some mana early, and I then path up this way through the area nodes, and then start moving towards the Templar section of the tree. On my way to the Templar, I pick up Elemental Overload, and there's something I want to talk about with Elemental Overload later. It's one of the reasons I am making the curious choice of including Stormbrain on the build. I then pick up some much needed stat nodes. Stat nodes are something you don't want on your endgame tree, but while you're leveling you probably need them, and even while you're still assembling a gear set like I am at the moment, you'll still need them. At some point you will want to unspec out of these, and if you can get by without ever allocating them, that's a big bonus. Next up, we move into the Templar area of the tree, pick up Retribution, which is a very solid node. We pick up this entire area cluster, and then we pick up these elemental damage nodes. And I've just noticed I still have a node that I had spec'd only for the leveling process that should have been removed earlier. I hadn't done that, and I will do so now and free it up. That's basically the extent of where I go in the Templar side of the tree. You'll notice that there are some powerful critical hit nodes that I'm not taking. Critical hit nodes, not this one, but particularly on the other side of the tree. That's because only the initial hit of Vortex and Cold Snap, so that's the initial while it's expanding, it can hit enemies and it can crit. Once it's already established itself and they just take damage over time on the ground, that can no longer benefit from critical hits, and so I don't attempt to scale critical multiplier in any way. And in fact, that is the reason I take Elemental Overload, because as long as I can score a crit every 8 seconds, or at least reasonably close to a crit every 8 seconds, then that will provide lots and lots of damage from, 40% more elemental damage from all sources. After this, there's a series of powerful energy shield nodes up here that are worth picking up at some point, either immediately if you've got some energy shield gear while you're leveling, but you can hold off on these if you're that way inclined. If you don't have the energy shield gear. I then also path down here and pick up Frostwalker, which is not an outstanding node, but it is a solid one that's attached to a few other reasonable damage nodes, and then leads to this powerful node, Arcanist Dominion, down the bottom. And yeah, these cold damage while using a shield nodes, these spell damage while using a shield nodes are pretty solid as well. Next up, we head upwards and outwards. Pick up this dual slot, which I need to improve because I'm using an absolutely terrible one that I got while I was leveling, and then pick up this powerful cold cluster, this Breath of Rime and Heart of Ice. Breath of Rime is more powerful than Heart of Ice, but we're going to pick both of them up anyway. Over here to pick up some more spell damage, and then Essence Surge for defense. And then at this point, I suggest pathing next to Chaos Inoculation and picking up these life nodes, which are still actually reasonable value to keep once you've changed to Chaos Inoculation, but they're very good until that point. And also pick up these cold damage nodes; they're excellent. I have chosen to take the Influence Cluster. This is probably not something that people will generally take, but I'm running the Discipline Aura, and I feel that having a 20% increased effect of my Discipline Aura, and also 4% reduced mana reserved for both Discipline and Malevolence, which I'll get to in a sec, I feel that that's reasonable value for 3 points, and it is only costing me 3 points because I would be pathing to Fingers of Frost anyway. Next up, I pick up the melding nodes, which I will eventually respec out of. They're not very good now that I've got, now that they're giving me 25% increased maximum energy shield for 4 points, which isn't a great deal. They were quite a bit better when I had life as well. I then am jumping into the Trickster section of the tree, and at this point I'm picking up just some of the juicier spell damage nodes that are available in the Trickster section of the tree. And once I've done that, so the next plan is Cold-Hearted Calculation, and then I'll be assessing some of the nodes further down. I may also need to take another mana node. I am really feeling the pinch on mana at the moment, and I'm forced to use what should be a mana flask, but I'm currently just using a hybrid flask because it's what I've got that has bleed immunity on it, and I haven't yet got around to rolling anything better or buying a flask that's better. I'm going to investigate whether Ethereal Feast is worth taking or not. I don't think it will be because it primarily helps with the damage of the initial hits that you're doing, so that causes energy shield leech. but I will experiment with it and see if it's any good, or if my initial thoughts were right. After that, there's a whole lot of easy jewels to get. Jewel slots are something that are pretty mediocre when you're leveling, but that once you've hit endgame, there's, you get access to very powerful jewels, and suddenly, well, obviously this 1 point jewel becomes an incredible pickup. In fact, this would be worth my while picking up now and just putting a dumpster tier jewel in. But I haven't got around to doing that, but I should. But even 3 point jewels that come with 2 quite weak nodes and then a jewel behind it, even those can be well worth the 3 point investment once you get to the point that you've got the resources to buy excellent jewels. Shifting over to the spells that we're using, I'm finding I'm getting perfectly good damage at the moment on a 4-link, and so I haven't yet sought out a 6-link. I've instead decided to stick with the 4-link chest that I had access to, which has Vortex, currently level 19, but it was feeling fine even at level 17, linked to Elemental Focus, Controlled Destruction, and Efficacy. I would also add Swift Affliction, and there's one other gem after that that I will leave a note about in the comments below, to add more, to basically juice up the damage over time aspect of the spell. But I haven't yet felt some pressing need to upgrade from the 4-link to a 6-link. My secondary spell, and this is very much a 2-spell build, this is not a build that deals its damage with one key spell. My secondary spell is Cold Snap, and that is linked to Efficacy, Controlled Destruction, and to Bone Chill. Again, all of this provides a lot of damage, feels like I'm really ripping enemies apart. I'm using Divinaris just as a pretty basic weapon that has caster stats on it. It's not very good, but it is serviceable, it gets the job done. And I'm using an energy shield that the 2 more powerful defensive pieces of gear that I've got are probably this armor, which is far from good, but for this point of a league, 38 hours into the league, it's okay. And this shield provide reasonable ES, and then these gloves also are something that's endgame quality. None of this gear is good, but it's all serviceable. In terms of the stats that you want to find on your gear, you want to have energy shield, you need to get your resist somewhere. And I would suggest that you get your resists on these slots that are less important. So those are your rings, your amulet, and your belt, and your boots, and your gloves. Those are the slots that have less potential to be good pieces of energy shield. So I recommend that you get your resists sorted on those. I believe I have this. This ring is reasonably solid, and I actually crafted life and mana onto this before switching to be Chaos Inoculations, so nowadays I would not use the life. The life on it is an irrelevant stat, but the mana is still important. It's got 26. It's got just over 100 points of resists on it. It's got 36 energy shield. So this is the sort of introductory level gear that you want to find. Later on, once you start getting much better gear, and once more gear is available to pick up from trade, at that point you might want to consider looking for opal rings, which have various fossil mods crafted onto them to give them to amp up their cold damage and to just generally provide you with your resists in a more concentrated form. So instead of having 36 and 40 as taking up 2 affixes on an item, ideally you'd have 47 and 48 using up 2 affixes, which would then free up an entire other item slot. I'm still using some absolute garbage gear. I'm using Ungol's Harmony, which I do not recommend. This is solely being used because I got it while I was leveling, and at the point that I got it, it was excellent. 100% extra global critical chance may seem a bit strange at first with me making no investment into crits. That is actually fairly strong, and it's the reason I've kept using this amulet for a while. Whenever I proc a critical, whenever I land a critical hit, Elemental Overload procs and gives me 8 seconds of dealing 40% more damage. This means that I don't care about the drawback on Ungol's Harmony, the negative 25% to critical multiplier. This means that I do need to land some crits somewhere. My primary damage spells aren't very good at landing crits. Their initial hit the initial hit, so that's while the vortex is expanding out, that is actually capable of landing a crit, but it doesn't happen very often. You fire this off, and I believe its cooldown is a full second, so it's not like you're going bing, 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 and firing them off in, oh sorry, it's 1.05 seconds, so it's not like you're landing many crits, even when you're quite surrounded. But that's where Stormbrain comes to the rescue. Stormbrain was a skill that had a slight nerf to damage. It's still an excellent skill for leveling. But what it does, it conjures these little blobs on the ground. These will attach to an enemy under various conditions, mostly the enemy just moving close to it. And then it will hit that enemy every 400 milliseconds after that. There's a very real chance for that to then cause the enemy to become, or to be critically hit. And when that happens, that will then proc Elemental Overload for you. The other interaction that's really powerful, and I'll show this off in a delve now, is that I have Stormbrain linked to Onslaught support. When you hit an enemy and deal a killing blow, this supported skill, so that means that Stormbrain has to deal a killing blow. When Stormbrain deals a killing blow, there is a 43% chance to gain Onslaught, which is a 20% increase to speed and cast speed and attack speed for 8 seconds. I'll demonstrate how quickly that comes up in practice in a delve, and you'll see exactly what I mean. I'll conjure my 3 Stormbrains. Now, without further investment, 3 is the limit. And I'll just run through and summon them to me here. You'll notice almost immediately, one of them has got a killing blow. They're not doing that much damage. They're not total slashes either, but they're not here for their damage. They're here because they snipe a killing blow, and they give me Onslaught for the whole, basically for the entirety of the zone if I'm able to keep moving fast enough. Onslaught also has a 10% chance to trigger upon hitting a boss. It's generally not as reliable. Like Stormbrain isn't hitting the bosses so often that's completely reliable, but it's still there. And with Stormbrain, I have one button bound is actually casting the Stormbrains themselves, and the second is the Brand Recall skill, which summons them all to me. Brand Recall is linked to faster casting, and that seems to be getting the job done at the moment. I also have Brand Recall, I have Stormbrain linked to added lightning damage at the moment. I'm not sure that's the right decision. It's because I feel that I need to just be dealing some extra damage, and I feel that there may be some chance to inflict small shocks that way. That's still something I'm experimenting with, and I think that I may end up going with Culling Strike as the alternative there. So Culling Strike support gives a slight damage boost, but more importantly, it means that any hit from Stormbrain that leaves an enemy on 10% of its maximum life or less, instead outright kills the monster. Because Stormbrain hits so often, it actually has a reasonable chance of getting in one hit during that window where the monster's between 10% and 0, and so there's actually quite a reasonable chance that it will snipe the kill and therefore trigger Onslaught. The other thing that I think might be even worth experimenting with, and this is getting into the slightly sillier mode, maybe even increased item rarity support. Item rarity support is something that's not very popular these days at all, and for pretty good reason. Generally speaking, adding to monster drop rarity doesn't help you very much. What it does do though, early in a league, it does mean that you get more unique items, and whilst most unique items are garbage at all stages of the league, it's certainly the case that powerful ones, and including common but powerful ones like the Sin Trek unique boots, are something that will sell at this point of a league. I was trying to purchase a Sin Trek boots that was well rolled earlier today for 30 Chaos, and although the boots had only been listed for all 7 minutes, they were already sold. That's just because at the moment there's just not much better. There's just not much that's out there that is better in the way of energy shield and movement speed boots. Anyways, that's the extent of the character at the moment. I'll certainly continue to play it. I'm not going to leave a permanent link to the character, although you can look up the character, and it's called Spam Toucans in Global, which you probably shouldn't do because it will get you muted. And I'm going to be respeccing this character into a Molten Strike Occultist at a later point. When I do that, they will entirely change, and so the state of the character at that point will be totally different to the Cold Damage Occultist. However, the Cold Damage Occultist has been fun to play, and it seems fairly effective, although it does take a little while to really feel like it gets its defensive rhythm together, and that really comes down to needing that 2, maybe 3 acceptable pieces of energy shield gear before it starts to work. At that point, the character feels like it's quite strong. I don't recommend playing this in hardcore unless you have already got some energy shield gear saved up for them. Anyways, that's all I got to say on this at the moment. Feel free to ask questions, and I will get back to delving and playing around with the Synthesis League.